buy-to-lets are absolutely terrible investments. Well, let me re-explain this and let me use the right terminology. Vanilla, this is what we call it in the industry, vanilla buy-to-lets are absolutely terrible investments. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I say they're terrible. The margins are poor, and also your money is stuck in the asset. This is why these are terrible investments. So anyone that wants to go into the property investing side of property investments, you can do buy-to-lets. I've got to be careful how I navigate this, but you should not do a vanilla buy-to-let. Now, you will know that there are 2.7 million buy-to-let landlords in the UK. Now, people often throw around these figures, but it doesn't mean there are 2.7 million vanilla buy-to-let landlords in the UK. A vanilla buy-to-let landlord means you go on Rightmove, you go on Zoopla, you find a property that's been advertised online or with an estate agent, and you buy it, and then you rent it out. Now, logic would imply that that's an okay investment, and any yields above 4%, 5%, and in some cases 6% tends to be what we would call a decent investment. With the recent changes to the rental market, even though buy-to-lets have been terrible for quite some time, these recent changes to the buy-to-let market stop this investment from being worth doing. Now, I'm not saying don't have buy-to-lets, I'm saying don't have vanilla buy-to-lets. So let me explain this in further detail. If we were to buy property for £100,000, that's 100k, you would have to put down £25,000 as your 25% deposit. That's the standard deposit that you would have to put down for a buy-to-let investment. Okay? Then you've got to pay £3,000 in stamp duty. By the way, if you don't know, anything over £40,000 as an investment property triggers stamp duty. So you've got to pay £3,000 in stamp duty. Then you've got to get the property up to standard. Up to standard means the correct EICR, which is the electrical inspection certificate. Then you've got to do a gas safety. Then you've got to spend some money. Let's call it £2,000. So all in, we're £30,000 into this investment. A £100,000 property, basic £100,000 property will rent for around £600 per month. You would have to pay your mortgage, which is going to be around £300 per month. You've got to pay your estate agent insurance, management fees. Let's call that another £100 per month. So it means from your 600, you're going to be profiting pre-tax. Let's leave tax aside for the meantime. You'll be making around £200 per month. But remember, you've invested 30k. In order to recoup your £30,000, you've got to calculate this £2,000 that you're making per month, times that by 12, that's $2,400 every single year. In order to recoup this 30k, it's going to take you 12.5 years to recoup that £30,000 so that you can buy another property in 12.5 years. Now, on paper, your $2,400 every single month seems okay. But the problem with that is this. The problem with those numbers is what happens if there's an issue in the property? What happens with voids, for example, when the property is empty? What happens if you've got to change the boiler or fix the boiler? What happens if the tenant doesn't pay their rent? What happens if you've got to evict the tenant? Now, all of these things affect every cycle of property investing. So whether you're doing any other type of property strategy, these things also do matter. But what I'm trying to do is change your perspective on how to look at property investments. So what makes a lot more sense in my mind, and what I do is I don't focus on the rental income. Now, of course, I want the rental income. Absolutely, I want the rental income. That helps to pay the monthly cost of managing that property. But you cannot build your entire business based on rental income because of all these factors that you have outside of your control. You might get a terrible tenant. You might get a tenant that defaults. You might get a tenant that destroys the property. You might get a complaining tenant. You might have voids. The boiler might break down. You have no control over the things that happen on this side here. So what makes a lot more sense in order to grow a portfolio is you want to consider strategies like BRRR, which means, and if you don't fully understand it, I can create a separate video another time, but the vast majority of you should really understand this already. But if you're watching this for the first time, then maybe you might not understand, so I can do another video. But BRRR stands for buy, reconfigure, rent, and then refinance. This strategy means, yes, this part here, number 2, is where we rent the property, and this part can be called a buy-to-let, but it's not going to be called a vanilla buy-to-let. Because a vanilla buy-to-let means you haven't added value to it to extract some of your initial investment back. That's what a vanilla buy-to-let is. But what we're doing in this context here is we buy a property, let's call it, we buy a property for £80,000. We reconfigure it, we turn it from a 2-bed into a 3-bed. So we've already got this property discounted because we didn't buy it off the shelf, it wasn't vanilla, we negotiated it through creative means. So we got this 100k property, we got it for, let's call it £80,000. We then spend £20,000 on turning it from a 2-bed into a 3-bed. So it means we're now 100k in. But let's say this property is now worth £150,000. So remember, we've bought it, we've reconfigured it, we've now rented out this property, which will be higher because if you had bought this property as a vanilla buy-to-let, at a 2-bed, you'll be getting your £600 per month. But now we've converted it to a 3-bed, we can now achieve, let's call it £800 per month. So that's really important. So now what you've done is, you've increased the value of the rental, you've increased your margins, you've reduced your risk, because in this point here, remember, in a vanilla buy-to-let, you were making £200 per month. But in this case here, by doing BRRR in this direction, you've potentially increased your profits to around £400 a month. That offers you some level of protection. It offers you greater protection than this £200. So that's one thing that you have to consider why buy-to-lets are terrible. Let's change it here. Vanilla buy-to-lets are terrible investments. So what you want to do, going back to this, is we've bought this property for £80,000. We spent £20,000 on doing it up. We've converted it from a 2-bed into a 3-bed. We've increased the rental price that we can get because it's now rented as a 3-bed. We've now increased the value to £150,000. The bank will give us a 75% loan-to-value mortgage on this £150,000. Let me get my calculator. Which then means the bank will give us physical cash back. This is important. So 75% on £150,000. The bank will give us back, check this, £112,500. Remember, how much did we put into this property? We put in £80,000. We put in £20,000 for the refurbishment. Of course, there's other associated costs, but for the benefit of this example, just understand it this way. So we spent £100,000. We've been paid back £112,000. So guess what happens here? You've got this back, which means you can go and pay your loan back, pay your bridging back, get your deposit that you put in, but you've got this back, you've got your 20k back. What does that mean? It means you've got money to go again and buy another property within the 3 or 6 month period. And you replicate it and do another one, and you replicate it and do another one. Whereas here in the vanilla buy-to-let section, you're going to be able to buy a property every 12.5 years because the only way you get any money coming from rent, which we calculated at £200 per month, times that by 12, 2,400. 2,400 divided by the £30,000 will take you 12.5 years in order to buy that asset. This is really, really important stuff. Really important. Let me change the color of this. So now we've got our 80k back, we've got our 20k back, we've gone to go and buy another asset. But because you've been paid to buy this property because you've got an extra £12,000, guess what you do with this £12,000? You can reinvest it to get another asset, or you can put this £12,000 aside, and this £12,000 aside acts as your security blanket in case any of these things happen. The tenant doesn't pay, the tenant's a nightmare, the boiler breaks down. This is how you do property investing in 2024. You protect your investment. Now, that's one way of protecting your investment, depending on your risk appetite, because that could be someone with a very low risk appetite. Depending on your risk appetite, what you could do with this £12,000 here is invest that extra £12,000 with the rest of the money you've got back, and you buy some more properties. So in this case, you've now built another income here because you do exactly the same thing. That's another profit of £400. You replicate the same thing again, that's £400. You replicate the same thing again here, that's £400. What you've now done is you've shielded yourself. Because if you had one buy-to-let, vanilla buy-to-let property, if the tenant stops paying rent here, you've got to go into your pocket to find this £200 per month. Sorry, you've got to go into your pocket to find that £300 mortgage per month. And you lose this £200 profit that you would have made. But if you're smart with it, you've bought additional assets, and this additional asset here contributes towards the cost on your first investment. And then this one contributes towards the cost on the second investment. And it's just a matter of perspective, changing the way you've been doing things so that you can do better and grow your portfolio better. I hope that helps. I hope that gives you some perspective. And I look forward to any questions that you may have.